Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Basis Technologies webinar series. My name is Ryan Manchi. I lead brand marketing at Basis Technologies, and this is webinar day. We're so happy that you're here with us. Quick little note before we get started and we jump into things. For the last 2 decades, Basis Technologies, our mission has been all about creating the most comprehensive media and automation and intelligence platform in the industry, with the goal to improve the lives of the people working in advertising, driving peak business operations and marketing performance for both agencies and for brands. We really consider ourselves to be the experts in AdTech, not only building Basis from the ground up, but we partner with the top media publishers. We integrate with all the major data providers, and we leverage billions of dollars in media investment for best practices and best-in-class service. We are comprised of an amazing team of nearly 1,000 media specialists, programmatic prodigies, AdTech visionaries, and all-around digital experts who provide our clients with raving fan service at every stage of any campaign. I do want to note that a recording of this webinar and the slides will be shared out with you, and we're going to have some time at the end for questions. So at any point, if you've got some questions, go ahead and plug those in to the Q&A tab, and we'll see what we get through. And again, we'll have some time near the end. So our presentation today, before I get to introducing our speakers, titled Digital Sea Change, all about the trends for 2023 and beyond. I'm pretty excited about my 2 guests, hopefully some familiar faces and names with me, and the fact that we're together in person is kind of special. So Noor, Naseer, and Kaitlin O'Brien, who are our media innovations and technology team. Beyond their, I think, similar background as far as like youth prodigies within figure skating, as I learned yesterday, true story, they really spend their days talking with brands, talking with agencies, talking to the different partners that are out there, and the trade orgs, and really diving deep into the research to provide key education on what those trends are and those hot takes within the industry. So with that, I'm going to hand it over. I'll be on camera, kind of off a little bit, but hand it over to Noor and Kaitlin to really drive the show and kind of talk through what we can expect for 2023.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Ryan, for the intro. And thanks, everyone, for joining the final webinar of the year in which we dive into trends. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the perspective we're sharing. Of course, there's so many trends impacting the marketing and advertising world, and we're just sharing a couple of them that we found to be particularly influential that we're going to see taking off next year. So as far as an overarching theme, we've called this year's trends presentation for 2023 Digital Sea Change. And for folks that aren't familiar with the terminology, sea change is in reference to just some sort of like larger pivotal change that needs to take place. And in this case, having to do with our industry and spaces in which that is occurring. So just to take us, and I'm just going to make sure I can go to the next slide if we want to head over here, guys. Yep. We've got advertising is in a state of recalibration. And when I say that we're in a state of recalibration, it has to do a lot with that digital sea change that we have also been exposed to. We're seeing a lot of need to see things that are familiar to us, that have been familiar in the digital landscape for quite some time, needing to move in directions that we historically haven't seen them move into. So moving into like a new era for many things that we're familiar with in the digital space. So with that in mind, I don't know if this is advancing.
Yeah. Again.
There we go, guys. Okay, so what are our trends? Let's not bury those. Let's show them right up front. We're going to talk about 4 areas where we need to pivot in relation to this change. And those areas include the future of audience, audio, streaming television, and also getting back to basics. So we're going to get into details about what we mean when we're speaking to back to basics in just a little bit. Let's go ahead and hop into this first trend over here. Reaching audiences in the future, or the future of audiences. For quite some time now, here we go. We've been talking about the cookieless future. And really now we've moved away from talking about the cookieless future into needing to talk about the cookieless now. And what that has to do with is the fact that many cookies that we've otherwise had access to, even though Chrome is saying that they're not going to let go of cookies until some point in 2024, the volume of identifiers that we've been accustomed to having access to have already dropped significantly. As you can see on the slide, we're showcasing the volume of identifiers have minimized by 50 to 60%. And why has that occurred? There's a bunch of different reasons. There's impact as a result of legislation. There's impact as a result of just advocates for the data privacy space having expectations around this, consumer privacy expectations, leading us down these pathways where we're losing cookies amongst other identifiers that are out there that advertisers and marketers have been accustomed to having access to. And what that means from a larger standpoint is that, let me see, let me click one more time there. And I'm going off of this, sorry, not to be the worst, everybody. We're doing this webinar live. I'm looking at this guy on the left over here. There are two major points of impact that I think we already have familiarity with, but the threat continues to loom and looms large in 2023. So we're concerned about audience targeting, and we're also concerned about measurement and attribution. So thinking about this from a larger standpoint, how do we look at everything all at once? As far as thinking of opposing goals out there. So many different players who are invested in what happens in the future with two different goals in mind. One of those goals being data protection. So concerned parties in that space include regulators, we've got consumers who are concerned, and then in so many ways, big tech. You know, big tech has gathered a lot of identifiers for a very long time, and all of us in the marketing and advertising space have been the beneficiary of having access to that type of data. And so their goal is to think about data protection differently and think about it seriously. And then on the flip side, advertisers, whether we're thinking about AdTech, we're thinking about brands and advertisers or publishers, we're concerned about identity resolution. And identity resolution that we've long been able to have access to, it is changing. That's a part of this pivot. It's a part of this digital sea change. So where there is commonality is where the future is headed as far as the future state of advertising and audience. So with that in mind, let's just take a moment to examine what does that mean for the future of the future state of audience. And so I just want to get this build up here to highlight what a couple of those core consideration points are. And we're concerned about having the opportunity to be able to target people with purpose. We also need to be able to first get that data, have access to data, create a value exchange, and making sure that we have clean processes in which we can gather that data, subsequently activate that data, and then finally analyze the impact of data that's being collected and leveraged differently from a first-party perspective and from an audience aggregation perspective in ways that differs from what we've long been familiar with. So here is a quote that was released from an economist on behalf of the IAB. Let me get in a little bit closer here. I know I'm on camera. I have to do this, guys. In which he said, if data is available in principle, it is hardly available in readily refined and usable form. And so too often we're having a conversation about the fact that, oh, we need first-party data. Sure, we do need first-party data, but ultimately we need to talk more about the processes to put in place so we understand what it is that we need to collect, and subsequently how we're going to go down a pathway of getting scalable data and then subsequently leveraging it for a world without cookies. So with that in mind, let's do an examination of what that workflow process should look like, starting off with first-party data, thinking about the foundations, what types of questions do we want to be asking from a foundational perspective. And it starts off with a couple of kickoff considerations. We've got some questions over here, including what are the resources that you have available now in order to enable that type of collection, followed by what is the data use case? Why do you want to collect the data that you're looking to collect, and how can you influence and enable somebody to give you that data with permission? And then finally, who is going to be responsible for managing and accessing that data? So there need to be parties and talent put in place to make sure that this data aggregation and consideration and segmentation is being taken seriously. And a part of that process is also thinking about the tech stack, like what are the technologies that you have put into place so that all of these things, these considerations can be put into motion. So a couple of considerations include what type of data management system or process do you have in place, followed by an identity resolution mechanism. And there's a series of identity resolution mechanisms that are out there that are being considered right now. Frankly, no advertiser can lean on a single one. There are a couple different things I think that will need to be added to a portfolio, but that's a second piece and in reflection for any advertiser, brand, or agency that's working on behalf of a brand or advertiser. And then finally, activation from an advertising, a paid media perspective. You need to have a DSP relationship so that those newly formed audiences that you want to leverage today or tomorrow are ones that you're going to be able to leverage in real-time biddable environments. And then finally, thinking about the actual collection process itself. So over here, just thinking about this in a couple different ways. When we want to collect that data, we need to offer people an incentive in an environment that would be natural for them to pass information along to us. So that could include thinking lead generation, right? You're offering something of value to someone, and now you're going to collect that lead. Really natural first-party data opportunity or collection of some data. Own channels, getting people to download your app, getting people to come to your website and offering something to them in those spaces so that they can continue to enrich their relationship with you being a brand or advertiser. And then also consideration for just general branding. How do you deepen a relationship with us? You want to be connected to our brand. Again, offering an appropriate incentive, but getting through this workflow process is absolutely imperative in order for advertisers to kick off how they want to brainstorm what this should look like for them. And I think advertisers need to really think about this seriously moving into next year. So just an expansion as we refer to data targeting and this dialogue around being able to target with purpose. There are a couple of different things that people have already been considering, and we just want to reflect on some of those things. And things that are already easily accessible, this previous pyramid we went through, there's some complexities. People haven't figured it out yet. People need to get moving. If they haven't started now, they need to start thinking about it. But what do we have on the table at this moment? Second-party data, it's been available, but it's on the rise in big ways because we need to turn to new alternatives. A big part of the second-party data conversation has been retail media networks, even though it's been around, knowing that there is these massive efforts being put towards not advertisers, but rather publishers and also, again, retail media networks, collecting that data, making it available to brands and advertisers. That's a big area of focus and where I think more brands are trying to pivot and make sure they can gain access to data. Followed by contextual. I mean, I know contextual has been around. This isn't the first time that it's been suggested to leverage contextual, but I think contextual is going on steroids moving into the future as we think about it in ways that go beyond, let's say, like keyword targeting. I think sometimes people conflate what they think contextual targeting really is, when now there's so many more inferences that the algorithms are able to take away when we're thinking about the segmentation of contextual targeting in ways that we haven't leveraged, let's say, in the past 10 years, that contextual has been available. And then finally, thinking about AI and ways in which AI can exist, I kind of alluded to the fact that AI is something that can be considered in relation to contextual targeting. I think AI, artificial intelligence, has many different applications today, but more specifically, why are we using it for targeting? And why do we need to think about new means by which we can access it? It establishes an understanding of someone, maybe their interests, their behaviors, their lifestyles, without needing to know exactly who they are. And that's really the premise that we want to go after, is how do we not leverage cookies, but we can leverage other types of technology and see what types of segmentations can net out. An expansion also, not just thinking about targeting, but also measurement and attribution. There are data clean rooms that people have been talking about. Data clean rooms, this is not the first year that we're reflecting on it, but it's the first year that we're reflecting on it with more seriousness, I would say, because oftentimes people think, I don't know if that has to be a part of a paid media conversation. But just for an expansion on what exactly data clean rooms are, they're spaces in which walled gardens share aggregated data that does not violate privacy requirements with advertisers, particularly relevant in a cookieless future. So that's a really short description of what we can think about when reflecting on if data clean rooms could be a part of that tech stack that you need to be building out, followed by mixed media modeling. So marketing mixed modeling, mixed media modeling, you call it what you want. It's a throwback, and it's something I think maybe Kaitlin's going to hint on later on when we get to back to basics. But as far as what it is, it's an analysis technique that allows marketers to measure the impact of advertising campaigns to determine how various elements contribute to their goal. And for so long, we didn't want to use mixed media modeling. We thought we had graduated away from it because we had pixels and tracking in place that gave us this one-to-one opportunity, and we're needing to go back as these new laws are taking effect in bigger ways and identifiers like the cookie are no longer available. And then finally, server-to-server tracking, which allows us to generate and store a unique identifier without needing the browser. So I think the repeated trend is that these are three big topical areas that are giving us opportunity to collect segments and audiences, and also subsequently attribute for the fact that our advertising dollars are being impactful, but we are just moving away from this web browser environment where we're seeing this minimization in our ability to not only target, but subsequently understand what ROAS is exactly looking like. So we'll wrap up on section 1 over here. A couple of key points to think on, and it's a point I can make again and again, and I think people don't take it seriously enough, to be perfectly honest, because we don't really want to always believe that we're moving into this cookieless world, but it is happening. As I mentioned earlier, ad signal reduction is very real. Also, securing new data collection resources and workflows, figuring out what that looks like for your organization or the organization or brand that you're working on behalf. And finally, executing data capture strategies. That's really an extension of that previous point. What does that look like for the brand that you work on or the brand that you represent? And thinking about all the different environments in which that collection can naturally happen. So that's wrapping us up on that pivot number 1. We're going to head into sound, and Kaitlin is going to take us into that.
Awesome. Yeah, and so our second trend is speed of sound, as you've all seen on the screen. And the reason why we're talking about digital audio in particular is because the ways that we consume and engage with digital audio at this point go well beyond the boundaries of how we would engage and consume traditional radio content. So with that, we'll move into the next slide. And at this point, we probably all experience this, you probably experienced this. Audio is an on-demand channel, and it goes everywhere that you go. So it's filling every facet of your day, it's supporting your mood and your activities. It allows you to educate yourself more on a specific topic, engage with people and with the culture and world around you. And in all honesty, like, we love talking about what we're listening to. If you think about the fact that everyone was throwing up their Spotify Wrapped results just a couple of weeks ago, it really showcased how much we like talking about what we're listening to, how much we're listening, and kind of like comparing notes with each other. So highly engaged audience, and really it's those elements of the ways that we are personalizing our audio experience, we are interacting with the content that we are consuming, and the people that are also consuming that same content are, again, kind of swapping notes there. And it's leading to this elevated level of brain activity. So the study you see on your screen is done by Spotify. They just released it in October of this past year. And it's really just comparing the digital audio listening experience versus the traditional audio listening experience and the brain activity that's happening in each of those environments. And so you see on your screen, each of those elements, engagement, emotional intensity, detail memory, are significantly higher in a digital audio experience. And so all of that brain engagement is ultimately transferring to engagement with the branded ads that are in those environments. So elevated mental activity leads to just more receptiveness to the brands and the ads that they're hearing in those environments in a digital audio context. And on top of that, and naturally, we are spending much more time with digital audio content. Nearly everyone is listening to some form of digital audio content throughout their daily life. If you think about just time spent within the channel and comparing across all of the different media channels, so whether it's print, radio, TV, CTV, a social environment, we're spending a quarter of all that time that we spend consuming media with streaming audio in particular, which is no small percentage. Despite that fact, and despite the fact that we are more heavily mentally engaged in this environment and we are personalizing and choosing what we're listening to, advertisers are still only spending about 2.5% of their digital ad budget, so not even your overall marketing, traditional and digital budget, but 2.5% in the channel, which just means that we have massive opportunity for brands to insert themselves more and engage in this context or engage in this channel and just really take advantage of this audience and come alongside this audience as they're listening and really, no pun intended, but like all ears to hearing different messages. And when we think about audio strategies, it's important that we think about these differently than we have in the traditional environment. So kind of our main go-to right now is to transfer a traditional audio spot into a digital environment. And that's definitely not wrong. That has its time and place and plays well in the funnel. But as we extend into these just more comprehensive or sophisticated audio environments, brands should really be thinking about their sonic identities. So it's a non-visual environment and thinking about how do I sound in this environment just as much as what does my brand look like. And with these brands on the screen, you see McDonald's, Intel, Apple. I'm sure all of you can think of these specific sounds associated with these brands. I'll play them each for you, but they're going to come to mind for you or they will be immediately recognizable once I play them. A little bit of an echo there for all of you. And Apple. And some of us may hear different Apple sounds because we built out an entire portfolio of sound elements for us to just, again, immediately recognize. So it's that memorability that brands can really leverage and should be leveraging and tapping into, especially as you can move those sounds across channels. So of course you can move your video components across channels, you can move your imagery, your branding, your logo across channels, but audio, again, has that really strong memorability component. And so when you associate that with the other types of content that you're moving across channels, it just really cements your brand in people's minds. And that's going to be especially important as we move from tapping to talking. And what I mean by that is being more so engaging with what we're listening to from a smart speaker perspective. So no longer just leaning back and selecting what we're going to listen to and then listen to it, but actually engaging back with that content and making requests of that audio content and having a dialogue. And you see that people are becoming more and more familiar with what this looks like. We're increasing the amount of tasks that we're requesting on the smart speaker. And that's really because smart speakers reduce friction. And for those of you who own smart speakers, you can probably have a quick mental game of what do I use my smart speaker for? And we're just going to run through a few of those activities that we do. And of course, the first activities that we engage in on a smart speaker are entertainment oriented. They're listening to music, they're listening to the radio. The next serve more of a utility purpose, so setting an alarm, setting a reminder, asking the time. And we're also asking smart speakers for more information. And our opportunities in this space are twofold. One is we already have opportunities to insert our brands into a smart speaker environment, particularly programmatically. But as we as consumers grow and as the technology grows and become more acclimated to it and just familiar to it, we're going to be completing a lot more of these requests or like informational query oriented tasks. And this is really where the opportunity gets interesting for brands. So you are able to kind of extend your paid search strategy in like a Google environment into a smart speaker environment and really understanding what are consumers asking for and how can my brand respond back? How can we fill that need for them? And finally, we're going to move along and talk about podcasts because podcasts are having a seriously powerful influence on culture. And for an example of this, we don't have to look any farther than the podcast serial, which was released in 2014. It chronicled the case of Adnan Syed. He was convicted of murder, and because of just the sheer audience engagement and investment in his story, this conversation continued for over almost the past 10 years. His case was re-examined. We had a lot of conversation on social channels, Reddit feeds, forums. There were documentaries made. So there's just a high level of cultural investment and cultural engagement with his story. And that ultimately led to his case being re-examined, and he was actually released from prison just this past fall. So just seeing that component of really strong storytelling and really strong engagement and people just investing in these podcasts and spaces and wanting to continue the conversation outside of them. And for brands that invested there, they are also associated with this high level of emotional investment and emotional intensity around the story. Kind of in continuation of that, we just see that podcasts are really playing this key role in how we engage with culture. So there's over 4 million podcasts on Spotify now, and that just means that there's a lot of niche content and a lot of content that people are consuming. So podcasts are a big driver behind why we're spending so much time in audio spaces, and it's really because we are in search of expanded knowledge bases and expanded information. A quick example on the right side of the screen here is just someone who is invested in a Sunday night football space, like big football fan. They're not just watching the games, but they're also then extending that time spent consuming around the topic in a podcast environment. And again, transferring that into a degree of cultural clout, talking about that with friends, talking about that on social media, going to consume more content on YouTube. And this is really just an opportunity for, again, brands to be a part of that conversation, but also to carry that strategy across channels. So having a presence in a Sunday night TV football environment, being in podcasts related to football. You know what I'm saying, just a whole well-rounded strategy that really plays off of this interest of an audience. Hit on audio really quick. We're going to wrap things up with some takeaways, and then I'll pass it back over to Noor to bring us into our next category or next trend. But first, kicking off is that nearly every American is now listening to streaming audio. So we saw this to be highly true. The story behind that is that we're not just listening to streaming audio, but we are incredibly engaged with what we're listening to. We're emotionally invested. Our brains are going to be mentally on, and this is just an opportunity for advertisers to be in an environment where people are ready to listen and they will listen. Next is to develop strategies that lean into consumer listening habits. And what I mean by that is just coming alongside people as they are listening to this content, understanding what are they listening to, where are they listening, when are they listening, and what does that mean for the kinds of messages that we're going to craft to reach them in these spaces. And the final takeaway is that brands should start to develop robust audio strategies, and this is twofold. So one, that sonic branding or sonic identity element that we talked about, just thinking about, are there any sounds or even just like quick catchphrases that we can associate with our brand that people are going to remember? The next is thinking about that conversational search strategy and how you can leverage these smart speaker voice assistants and voice assistant environments a little bit more heavily as you move into a broader audio strategy. With that, I will pass things back over to Noor.
Awesome. So we're going to move into our third trend over here, our third pivot, because this is definitely a trend that you have familiarity with, but it is important in new ways. And we've referred to it here as streaming consolidation. I think there's a little bit less consolidation, a little more expansion going on in the streaming space. So to that point, let's take a look at the ecosystem. And I think many things on this screen might look somewhat familiar to ecosystems you've thought about in the past or that have been discussed in the last couple of years. But the thing that really sets apart this look at the ecosystem from a streaming television and connected TV standpoint, compared with past years, is the fact that these brands are now all on the table for advertising opportunities. I think for too long there was a disconnect when we would talk about the popularity of streaming consumption. There wasn't a direct correlation with where you could run ads versus where people were actually consuming. And now we basically closed the loop there, where there's so many more opportunities to run ads in all those spaces where we are watching, maybe for too much time, a lot of streaming content. So with that in mind, let's take a look at something besides all these different numbers as far as the different connected parties. So this kind of speaks a little bit to that consolidation piece, who is connected to which ones of these brands. But without bogging us down and getting into all the details there, we'll talk a little bit more about this later on. Let's just take a little bit a look into the past. Like, what's something that has been discussed heavily? If you've been following the connected TV space for quite some time, you would know that specifically, more so than anyone, Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, had said on many occasions that Netflix was never going to move forward with advertising. It just wasn't necessary. And there were some reasons for that. I mean, they were in a place of continued growth, many cycles of growth, year-over-year growth, as far as volumes of subscribers and users. And they basically plateaued at this point. And I think anybody who has been staying on top of what's going on with the Netflix saga, you see that there's been quite a dip because things have eventually plateaued. Even though I don't know that Tim Cook came out quite as strong, Apple had also come out and said that advertising really wasn't on their roadmap, but the tune has really changed, and I think we're going to see a lot of advertising opportunities. We are going to see a lot of advertising opportunities from both Netflix and Apple moving into next year as it relates to their streaming products. A big part of this conversation, too, is the fact that there's tiers in terms of there is still an option on the table for you to pay a premium dollar amount where there would be no ads, but these new players in the streaming space have an expectation that when they move into a world in which there will be advertising, that more of these subscribers are going to push themselves probably into the ad-supported space. That's where the vast majority of people are going to stay on, is paying the lower dollar amount. So the anticipation is that there is going to be a lot of ad-supported subscribers in the mix for both of these premium players. And here, just a little play on the fact that what's that cost? What's the opportunity cost of staying premium versus going ad-supported? And I think we tabulated it out, Kaitlin and I, that it's roughly the cost of like a nice burrito. And, sometimes when you think of something like going to Chipotle and, hey, guac is extra, sometimes guac being just an extra $2 is just a cost too high that people aren't ready to take on. So with that in mind, we do think the expectation is that there's going to be a lot of people in that ad subscription category. So an expansion here as far as what's happening, and really just an expansion of that previous point. Even though consumers say that they would not rather have ads, I think at this point where things have netted out with the economy, the economic downturn, consumers are looking to save where they can. And so here we're looking at some of the ad-supported models that we're seeing unfold moving into next year. Some of these things have already been around, but let's take a little bit of a closer look. Two key pieces. One is AVOD. AVOD's been around for a long time. Oftentimes we talk about subscription video on demand compared to ad-supported video on demand. And so players like Hulu and Peacock have been offering these kinds of opportunities for some time. And it's true, too, for players like Freevee and Tubi, where their claim to fame is that they came into the marketplace telling you, hey, we offer free TV, which is secret code or not so secret code for, there's going to be a lot of ads. And the popularity of these formats and the volume of ad-supported opportunities associated with both of them are plentiful. Also an expansion moving into this year is the fact that there is now much deeper connection between these walled gardens or these content providers and actual ad tech supported partners. So here we see Fox and Magnite, Roku and Nielsen, Netflix and Microsoft, Dish and Beachfront, just to name a couple of popular ones. And what are the implications associated with these partnerships that we're seeing moving into next year, and some of them that have already been established in 2022? And these are a couple of the reflections of what AdTech prioritization is going to enable and offer to advertisers, including just programmatic enablement, the opportunity to streamline your transaction, not needing to wait to do things the longer way, the long-form way. The expectation is it's going to be a little bit more cost-effective and minimize the fragmentation of reaching out to each one of these partners individually. And then there's also the opportunity for more data aggregation and activation. So how do we go beyond saying, I just want to run in this program and get X volume of impressions? I want to leverage more data. And all of these players in the space, it can be presumed or understood that there has been a lot of data collection, but there are going to be new layers of data inference and or data layering that we can leverage as we think about the types of concentrated audiences we want to reach with more precision. And then finally, I think this part is a little bit still to be seen, especially since these are burgeoning days, but measurement and integration, having enhanced transparency around where we're running, and then also standardized metrics. And then finally, brand safety and fraud protection. So things that we have examined in the past, but I think are going to come through in a bigger way as these ad tech partnerships really launch moving into the future. And I also wanted to highlight a couple of different creative opportunities that we were expecting to see more of as we move into this new year. Let me see if we can get these playing over here. Get this mouse. Here we go. So we're playing the spot for Dixie Ultra, as you can see, a deeper opportunity to see using your remote what's going on with this particular product in particular. We got another example here for Listerine. So we can see there, Listerine has this 21-day challenge. There's a smart speaker, so you can be heard opportunity. I know Kaitlin spoke at length about not just hearing, but rather being heard with audio spots. We can see some of these opportunities blooming into the CTV or streaming TV space as well. And then finally, one more over here. And you can see that there's an opportunity for you to actually place an order via a connected device, in this case, a connected television. So moving from a much more passive and lean back experience into an active one. I know there's some controversy around this. Who all is looking to do this deeper level of engagement? I think as it becomes more plentifully available and as consumers get more comfortable with engagement, assuming that they will, we're just going to see more examples of this existing in the connected TV space. There we go.
A lot of buttons.
Yeah, there's a lot of buttons over here, guys. Just trust. We're working on it. Okay, so I want to jump to the catch over here. Where can we run? Where can we run now? We're talking about these larger trends, but what are accessible opportunities, networks, integrations, private marketplace deals that are on the table, there are a lot of them associated with the big streaming players, walled gardens, content providers that we're all familiar with. And then a couple of them are still on the horizon, like soon-to-be opportunities that can be available for people to leverage in real-time biddable environments. So a lot to look forward to in a very near future. As far as takeaways on this section, streaming providers are really accelerating the opportunity to have access to these premium advertising opportunities that historically we were talking about, but that weren't quite accessible, followed by there being this deeper familiarity, not familiarity just, but also a favorability with ad-supported because of necessity, right? Like we do things out of necessity at the end of the day. Sometimes people might think they want to skip ads, but at the end of the day, we want to do the thing that's going to be transactionally appropriate for us. So I do think there's going to be a big rise in this ad-supported content consumption. There's also going to be more of these advancements as a result of these partnerships between these walled gardens, or rather content spaces that are offering streaming opportunities with ad tech players. And it's also going to reflect not just with better targeting and data opportunities, but finally also some new types of ad formats. So some more to come moving into next year. And with that, we're going to move into our final trend with Kaitlin as we get back to basics.
Yeah, running things out with back to basics, which is really just bringing us back to the premise of this entire presentation, and that is that we as an industry and we as advertisers are facing this digital sea change, and the fundamentals of how we work and how we do our jobs are being upended. And a lot of you are probably asking yourselves, like, what is my job going to look like in the future? And to do that, we have to take a step back and just acknowledge this paradox that we've kind of created for ourselves, partaken in, and that is the fact that we are over-reliant on these tools that have been oversimplified. So tools and tactics, things that have made campaign planning, launch, activation easier, which was a huge benefit to us, but they also instilled this false sense of confidence and laziness in our media buying itself, and we're not able to, or we don't often think to develop these comprehensive, strategic, full-bodied media plans that are going to be building brands for the long term. And a good example of what this looks like, and probably if you have been in the media buying space for a while, you have partaken in Facebook's ads platform, and it's certainly not limited to Facebook, but a lot of us have engaged in this platform, so you probably know what I'm talking about. But moving into the platform with your audience persona, your KPI, your creative, you were able to take that audience persona, put it into the interface and select, I am going to be targeting people who are first-time home buyers, they're in market to buy a home, and then I'm going to upload their ethnicity, their demographics, so age, gender. Even at one point we were allowed to select their credit score, and then you selected your KPI. So let's say in this example it's going to be lead generation. You upload your creative, hit launch, and then the system starts running your campaign and optimizing it in the background. And that's all well and good, and that, again, made our lives easier, and it made it easier to anticipate and feel confident in success. The problem is that these tools and these tactics are not going to be available to us anymore, or they already aren't. Like the credit score targeting is just not available to us. And the call out is that we need to be taking things back a step and thinking about how can we activate these strategic, sophisticated media strategies that are not reliant on these tools that ultimately kind of take the mental work out of it, so to speak. And to do that, we're going to focus on, in these next few slides, 3 pillars of better media strategy, or better media strategy best practices. And one of these, of course, is planning. So thinking about how can we create these comprehensive, long-lasting strategies that build up consumer favorability and brand loyalty ultimately. 2, brand protection, and it's something that we've been talking about for a long time. It is an inherent part of our work in the industry, but just talking about how we can better use brand protection strategies to steward our investments. And then finally, we'll touch on automation, which is just helping us to alleviate some of this menial work that we're doing so that you can pour that time back into these comprehensive strategies and brand protection strategies. First, I'm going to start things off. So this sounds really ominous. We're talking about the perils of bad media strategy, but we're going to talk about the bad so that we can talk about the good and how we can flip the bad on its head in order to walk away with stronger media planning strategies and implementation. So 1, just this failure to face the problem. And what does that mean? In short, it means that we are not foreseeing the challenges that could come up as we execute and activate our media, therefore impacting performance. 2, mistaking goals for strategy. So again, the Facebook Interface example is a really great example of just thinking that, I've uploaded my creative, I've reached my audience, and I've launched my campaign, and now we're optimizing towards this KPI. That's just executing from point A to point B. It's not necessarily a well-rounded strategy. 3, scattered strategic objectives, and this can take a couple of different forms. One is either just not aligning KPIs appropriately to the channel that they are running within, or not orchestrating those KPIs across various channels, so you're moving someone through the funnel. And 2 is kind of a contingency, or a part of that is that just thinking about KPIs and maybe not subconsciously not acknowledging that we have this expectation of all of our channels to achieve the same KPI, which is ultimately a return, ROAS, or like a conversion event. 4, cycles of recycling, so this could be a campaign itself, so just hitting relaunch or repurposing a campaign and not really iterating on it, and also just creative. I think we have a tendency to carry creative across channels because it feels flexible, but in reality, we should be doing more with creative. How do we flip those on their head? And we're going to start things off with, of course, the inverse of our first peril, and that is to understand your challenges. And a great illustration of this is Coinbase. You probably all are familiar with the ad that they ran during the Super Bowl. It was that QR code that bounced around the screen. The challenges that Coinbase failed to foresee were that their website was going to crash because it was so overloaded from literally the sheer volume of people watching the Super Bowl and scanning that QR code. The next challenge that they didn't foresee is that people are going to need to be educated on how to use their product and how to continue working with that brand or leveraging that brand once they converted on that QR code. And this ultimately impacted, so it seemed like Coinbase had short-term success, but in the long term, that campaign kind of fell flat, like people just abandoned the app. 2, thinking about how to orchestrate your channels and KPIs. So we're going to take an example from Quip. If you are a heavy podcast listener like I am, you may be familiar with getquip.com. That sticks in your head and you're like, I do need a new toothbrush. So you're going to go to their website, but you get distracted. Maybe your dog comes in all muddy and you're like, I got to go. And so you bounce from that website session. So how can Quip re-engage you on a different channel once they recognize that you're going to be more ready to spend some time with their brand, and that is going to be in an Instagram or a social media retargeting environment. And they're going to offer you an incentive to go back to their website and convert on that product, so a coupon. So just thinking about what is the holistic orchestrated strategy where I can piece my KPIs together and have them hand off to each other. 3, establish your baseline. So just using the available metrics to you to establish what is the expectation that we can have for this campaign, and then you can better set expectations around performance goals, what KPIs you need to set. So again, just leveraging that data to your advantage to start things off on a better foundation. 4, of course, is don't recycle, reinvent, and we saw a really great example of this in what Noor shared with the streaming TV environment, where you're not just running a TV spot at this point, but you're able to do more with that creative format. And on the screen here, you see the inverse of that, where TikTok and Instagram allow you to make a video format out of just static images. And that really just doesn't jive with the way that people are used to, especially in a TikTok environment, looking for the ways that they're going to engage with content. It's not the content experience that they expect. We've rounded things out with planning. That was a very quick dive into how to improve your planning strategies. And now we're going to move into our second back to basics principle, which is brand protection. And again, we can probably be asking ourselves, why are we still talking about brand protection? Don't we have this solved? This is kind of an old topic. And the truth is that we obviously don't have it solved, because we're losing nearly $70 billion to ad fraud in 2022, which, by the way, a third of that is going to come from the US. So the problem is still very much prevalent. As new channels and tactics arise, so do bad actors who are going to take advantage of how they can monetize in that space. On the other side of that is the fact that consumers are going to be translating their bad or their poor content experiences or low quality content experiences to the brands who appear in that space. So there's a lot at stake there, but at the end of the day, we kind of still take this passive position or this stance when it comes to brand protection, and this takes 2 forms. One is set it and forget it. So taking your strategy and being like, we have brand protection taken care of, it's good to go, we're going to apply this to every campaign, but we're not going to revisit it, which leads to knee-jerk responses, or just not having a strategy to begin with leads to knee-jerk responses where a crisis comes up, some celebrity goes off the walls or a large geopolitical event occurs, and that is just an unsafe environment for your brand to be in. So two things that kind of put us at risk when it comes to brand protection, and how can we make sure that we are not Tina Fey or that cat typing frantically on a Friday, solving a fire drill. So ways that you can take action on protecting your brand, and these are adapted from the IAB's brand safety checklist. If you want to know more, you can go check it out on their website, but we're going to hit on just a few key points from that checklist. And the first is to level set with clear objectives. So understanding for our brand specifically, because every strategy should be unique to the brand that is implementing it, understanding what are our tolerances and what are our thresholds for brand safety. Where do we stand on geopolitical issues? Where do we stand on healthcare related issues? Do we have a low tolerance? Do we have a high tolerance? The next is to get to know your tools. So this very much so goes along with the first step, and that allows you, getting to know your tools allows you to put that tolerance threshold or that tolerance portfolio into action, and thinking about what are the standard and the advanced tools that we have available to us in order to implement that strategy. It can be anything from pre-bid filters from like a Peer 39 or a ComScore, being able to protect the inventory even before you run on it, so looking for inventory that's AdTech verified, and then moving into some of those more standard elements like a domain list or like a PMP or a programmatic guaranteed deal. And this is something that we at Basis, I think Ryan alluded to this a little bit in the beginning, but this is a high priority for us. It's obviously still a big issue, and so we are constantly seeking out the best ways to optimize our supply path, to work with the best vendors to make sure that our clients are as protected as possible. That rounds out brand protection for us, and we're going to close out our back to basics trend with talking a little bit about automation. And media buyers, if you're out there, I know you feel busy, especially this time of year, but you probably find yourself asking a lot, like, where did my time go? Like, you get to the end of the day and you're like, I have no idea what I did. What did I do? And that's probably because you're moving between several different platforms. On average, we're using 9 different media platforms to execute our campaigns, manage our campaigns, monitor performance. And we're also spending about 6 hours on low-value tasks. So it could be everything from communication components, billing reconciliation, naming conventions, add-ups. I see you're probably spending a lot of time on naming conventions and tag generation. So how can we move from these tasks, or from this way that we are inefficiently spending our time, into better spending that time and taking back our time? And the first is to leverage streamlined planning tools to ensure that you have campaign success. So thinking about things like automated RFP negotiation, which is going to allow you to funnel all of your RFPs into one campaign, and then ultimately generate your line items, generate your ad tags. So just that whole process that was once very, very manual is going to be streamlined. The next is to produce higher value campaigns using sophisticated optimization tech. There's a lot of opportunities out there, but the biggest ones are thinking about how can I use machine learning, or how can I use algorithmic learning to have optimizations running on my campaign in the background. Finally, drive impactful data discovery and deliverables with measurement capabilities. So thinking about, does the system that I use have API connections that are funneling data into one system, and how can I leverage reporting dashboards to create better presentations so that I can report out results to my stakeholders. And all the automation, just a quick point here, is that all the automation is saving us over a full work week per campaign. So it's a lot of time that you can reinvest into other activities. Finally, we're going to close some things out with back to basics takeaways. I'll hit on these really quick, but just assess the potential pitfalls to avoid bad strategy. So go back through that exercise and evaluate where can I improve on perils and turn them into opportunities. 2, steward brand investment by fine-tuning brand protection. So again, revisiting your brand protection strategy, thinking about what it means for your brand and how often you're going to complete that exercise. And finally, embrace automation and allocate that time back into high-value tasks like your planning processes and like your brand protection strategies. We have just a couple more slides for you all, and then we will jump into questions.
So we'll take a quick second here to wrap things up. I know we've obviously gone long over here, as trends usually do take a moment to get through. A quick quote over here on this topic. Every economic downturn has led to the creation or accelerated adoption of a new media, whether it be TV, radio, or social media. And in the months ahead, we should all keep an eye on what's next. Mentioned by a chief executive over at Dentsu. And really the point of this being that this has been a time of significant change. It is a time of economic downturn. And although we are not necessarily anticipating the creation of a new media at this time, we are expecting a new era for a couple of different channels and or techniques, tactics that we've been highly reliant upon, existing in new ways. And we really need to be ready for that change. I don't mean to showcase a tweet like this one, definitely a downer, where we're highlighting the fact that tech overall and also AdTech and aspects of AdTech, which are a part of these tech companies, have been impacted. And we're anticipating that that impact is going to continue to exist in many ways, like trickling into all of next year. But ultimately, it's a time to get creative, to really reflect on these trends that we're seeing and dive deep, not wait for tomorrow and or troubles to show up and only working after it's too late. So a quick recap on these different advertising digital sea trends for 2023. One, as it relates to audiences of the future, we really need high value actionable data that's going to enable us to comprehensively capture data, process that data, and ultimately have activation processes in place. So we got to get the good quality data. Ultimately, we need to have a workflow in order for us to leverage it, getting that plan in place. Second, audio, it's everywhere. It's already been everywhere, but it's going to go everywhere in new ways. So really, there's a common thread between both the audio and also the streaming television spaces where we're seeing an expansion, whether we're being heard, we're more deeply interactive, there's new layers of ad tech that are coming into the equation. So that's really something that we're going to see existing in exciting new ways moving into 2023, both for digital audio and for streaming television. And then finally, as it relates to going back to the basics, I know that was a hefty section, hefty things for people to reflect on, and all the labor that's going to go into moving into a future in which some of the things we've been so reliant upon are not going to be prevalent in the same ways that they historically were. But as we're seeing these changes take place across the ad tech industry, as we see this disruptive change, we really need to look back and really think about the foundations of advertising. And I know it can be hard to dig deep into what we thought we could move on without, but there's never been a better time to go back and think about those fundamentals. So with that, we're going to wrap, and we're going to, if we have a few minutes here, we might jump into a question or two.
Perfect. Yeah. Awesome. That was fantastic. We'll get in tight, nice and tight, to kind of see what kind of questions we've got from the group. We've already got a few that are in here. I think just like quick recap as I'm kind of reading through these. It's fascinating to me kind of where we're at, the fact that like sounds like good news for advertising as a whole, with like more streaming video, more audio opportunities, still some questions, maybe a little bit of concern, especially as it comes to addressability and targeting, and then also the measurement side. That was a theme, I think, in almost like every single section. How confident are y'all, I'm kind of put it to both of you, but if one of you just want to take it, how confident are you in some of these new solutions? You talk about the first-party data, the second-party data, the contextual targeting, maybe some of these AI tools, the myriad of other identity-based solutions. How confident are you that this is going to be solved in 2023? Do you think that's going to happen? Is that something that people can expect?
I don't know if there's going to be a hard solve in 2023, right? Like, we're just getting really to a point where we're accepting the fact that what we have long been relying upon is really going to be going away. And now we're kind of fortunate in that there hasn't been this dramatic and sudden departure. It has been a little bit of a slow drag, which is getting people into that emotional state of saying, I can no longer be in denial. I need to prepare for what's to come. So it's also the question of what Ryan just said is like, is there going to be a solution? I don't know. What do you accept as a solution? Is a solution a reflection of something that needs to reflect exactly what we had in the past? I think there's going to be a lot of education moving into next year as we come to grips with the fact that we're not going to get the same one-to-one measurement that we historically could. We also cannot verify and validate audiences with the same ease and simplicity that we historically have been able to, and that there's a lot more legwork for advertisers to actually collect information with permission and subsequently have that same opportunity to target people. And the scale won't exist in the same way, so there's a lot of responsibility. So it's kind of a tricky question, a tricky answer to the question, but it's the type of like deeper, nuanced answer that needs to be shared. We all have to have a reality check.
Awesome. All right, so looking through some of the questions, I love there's some consistency. Victor, Michael, a few other folks even asking about digital out of home, which is not something that was specifically touched on. We talked about it before. We've included in some other areas. I know there's a fantastic materials that you all put out. It's something even as we were talking about next year, it didn't get included in here. And I know we only have so much time for everything, but it's not necessarily a new area for Basis. It's an area that we've invested in the past, but my thinking, what I've seen, it is a growing area, and we can expect more. I don't know if either one of you want to elaborate a little bit of like what you can expect, or just kind of excitement, energy around that, maybe some of feedback that you've heard from clients that you've worked with?
Kaitlin definitely can speak to digital out of home in even more detail than I can. I'll just say one very quick thing is that in the past, when we were considering digital out of home even a decade ago, which is when we started introducing many serious partnerships, it wasn't where it is now because of the programmatic digital out of home aspect. Many of the things that we talked about in the streaming television section, we're seeing those things start to take effect on a medium that has otherwise historically been exclusively analog in so many ways. So being able to remove the fragmentation, be able to do data layering, it's something that's making digital out of home something that deserves to be in a trends presentation. It's something we're definitely going to dive into. But again, I'll leave some room for Kaitlin to expand.
Yeah, taking out my talking points, but my only expansion is that digital out of home is just kind of the last digital domino, so to speak, to fall. It's one of those where it was rooted in, they were all rooted in traditional, but it stayed rooted in traditional as a medium for much, much longer than channels like audio and channels like TV, but we are starting to see some pretty rapid advancement there too, and some of these questions may be born out of a little bit of exposure to just a lot of the press that digital out of home has gotten lately, and just a lot of conversation about integrations. We at Basis are ready to finalize our integration with a major digital out of home partner, and just being able to take advantage of, as Noor kind of alluded to, all of the elements of digitizing a channel. So it's better measurement, it's better targeting, it's better creative opportunities. I think you'll start to see a lot of really awesome creative opportunities coming into the mix from digital out of home. So whether it's AR oriented or interactive, using audio or video components, just thinking about how can we get more creative with this medium and how can we move this across channels? Because if you think about it, like AR will be huge in the future. That's a mobile experience that someone can use to pair together their mobile and their out of home experience. As just one quick example, but that for you, if you're advertising between those two channels, like a mobile is a touch point for you to gather data on someone and for you to continually reach someone. So just kind of that continued experience.
Yeah, it's amazing to see the platforms that are available. I feel like even, 10 years ago, some of these digital out-of-home channels just didn't exist. The technology wasn't there. There's some that I've seen around like electric vehicle charging stations, which is like, that wouldn't have existed 10 years ago, but now you're starting to see that grow more and more. So really kind of interesting to kind of see the progression there, and then also the more touch points to be able to programmatically buy, plan, execute, all that. So super exciting there. We talked about brand safety, right? And the critical component of that. And there's obviously some great tools that are out there, great partnerships that we have, things that we put into place just to be proactive about it as well. And that's with a lot of like the generally kind of suspect sites, like publishers that are out there, the nefarious traffic and bad actors that are there. There's been some discussion about Twitter under some new ownership, new people kind of coming back. Any hot takes? I know social is not an area of expertise of either one of you, but care to offer any feedback of just kind of take of brand safety and just if Twitter is a challenge there, or something to be considered, or any, like...
My initial thoughts?
Yeah, right.
It's interesting. There's really been a mixed bag. I don't have like a formal POV on what's happening at Twitter. There are brands obviously that have said, Twitter no more. And then there are brands that are kind of going on business as usual. I think sometimes it takes some time for a brand to decide what their official sentiment is. Like even with Facebook, a lot of people have said that trust has been eroded with Facebook. It took a lot of brands a very long time to come to that conclusion. It took consumers a really long time to come to that conclusion. So I don't want to make any premature share premature thoughts on the topic, but I think we'll see in 2023 in big ways, like the future of what's going to happen with Twitter, for better or for worse, and what that means for advertisers, and if they want to be associated, we'll just have to wait and see. But Kaitlin, do you feel differently about that?
I don't feel differently. I think the only question to ask yourself is like, where does Twitter play in my strategy? Like, how imperative is it to my overall media goal success? And if it is deeply imperative, then maybe cautiously stay in that channel, but really just thinking about like, where does this play in my strategy, and is there another channel that could take its place, or is this absolutely imperative to what we're trying to do?
Perfect. Yeah, case by case basis. I think what I've heard from our social team is that the advertisers, I wouldn't say like widespread, like just pulling away from it, but the folks that are there that are running campaigns have continued to see good results. And I think a lot of times it's like, well, what's important? Is it about driving the results? Is it, just level of comfort with the platform, whatever it may be. So I think good assessment there from a strategy perspective. The one final thing I want to get to, we talked about a little bit with some of these new emerging ad-supported channels. Hot topic. Netflix coming on the scene, Disney Plus even, offering up an ad-supported solution. Thoughts? I mean, that started to open up a little bit, but like when do you think there's going to be more widespread availability? Do you think it's going to be 2023 when advertisers and agencies are going to be able to transact through platforms like Basis?
I think the speed with which those opportunities become accessible are 100% dictated by the brands themselves, right? Like it all boils down to what Netflix, what Disney wants to, and also how much revenue they're looking to derive, right? At the front end, the conversations as far as targeting opportunities, whenever things start up as it relates to having new advertising opportunities with a new channel and or platform service provider where we historically didn't have access, is usually some pretty mild targeting options. But I think they're going to ramp it up if they're not getting the anticipated dollars or spending from advertisers. So I think there's a action and reaction. So they're going to see how is the market responding to what we're bringing to the table. It sounds like people are really excited. People want to get into Netflix and Disney, and then the question is, how do we expand from there? How much more targeting do we want to make available, and how much more money can we make off of that too? So I think the ball is in the court of these content providers, and it's really hard for me to speculate beyond that. Obviously, everybody wants it, and if they can get access to it, they will. But I think it's a testing and learning time for those brands.
All right. So maybe, just maybe, it'll be next year.
Maybe.
I'm confident. I think it's going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll see. I'll put it out there. Yeah, exactly. So we're a few minutes over, but I appreciate y'all not only tuning in today, powering through, sticking with us as we went a little bit over, but so much to cover, so much great information. I think on that note, I really encourage you all to go and check out basis.net/trends. Not only is there there will be a link to a recording of this presentation and the slides. We've got an amazing complimentary, with an E, 2023 trends report, some really interesting vertical specific trends we pulled from our very subject matter experts across the company. So really lots of great information to dig into, and really, I think, hopefully inform your 2023 strategy. So I want to, again, thank you all. Thank you, Noor. Thank you, Kaitlin, so much. Always a pleasure to have you join us and drop some knowledge. And I would encourage you all, as you log out, you're going to be prompted with a survey. Put in feedback for today, but also, what are you interested in hearing about for next year? We've already got some plans together. We'll kick things off in Q1 with the webinar series as it continues, but would love your feedback again today and what you'd like to hear for next year. Slides presented, recording is going to be sent out to you via email. I hope you all take some time off over the coming weeks. Take care of yourselves, take care of one another. I'm Ryan Manchi, Noor, Kaitlin. This has been the Basis Technologies webinar series. We're so happy that you joined us, and we'll see you in 2023. Thank you.